Sorry, you'll have to excuse the pink uniform today. I got a little bit of Klingon blood, well, everywhere. Hello, interwebs! I hope you're all doing well, and I am here to review the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. This one, Season 5, Episode 4? I speak good well. This one titled A Farewell to Farms. And as per usual, for those of you who don't know, I will stay spoiler-free right up front, or at least generally spoiler-free, and then we'll get into spoilers in the back half and get into some specifics. But staying general, this one was a lot of fun, and is one of, those Star Trek Lower Decks episodes that breaks the mold, that tries to do something a little bit different than it normally does. Not so much as like episodes like Weege Dooge way back in episode 2, or the episode about Peanut Hamper in, I think, season 3. So it's not so much going that far afield. We do get some sort of more typical Lower Decksian style stories. But it is trying to do something a little bit different, and this time focusing on a Klingon story, and even more specifically, our recurring character of Ma'ak, who has appeared in several episodes, like the aforementioned Weege Dooge. And I loved this one. Again, as per usual, it's a Lower Decks episode. I love it. But what I really liked this one for was kind of going into an analysis of Klingon honor. And, something that I've always spoken about is Klingons are not my favorite species in Star Trek, but what I do really like them for is when we get into discussions of what honor really means in a Klingon society, beyond just a warrior, let's beat things up sort of ideal. And I think the best show that ever did that was Deep Space Nine. And there's certainly some echoes to Deep Space Nine and some of the ideas present in this episode that I really, really liked. And I thought that focus was really, really fun. Also, just some of the Klingon jokes they have here, and even some like very deep pulls. There's one joke in particular that has a deep pull that nearly killed me with laughter for just how weird and fun of a reference it is. But at the core of this episode is just really analyzing the meaning of honor. And sort of in a very Lower Decksian style way, looking at honor not as just about how strong you are and beating people up, but about honor being about solidarity, strength, finding kinship with each other, and using the character Ma'ak to kind of break that down in a really beautiful, very Lower Decksian kind of way. Just again, Lower Decks getting the ethos of what I love about Star Trek, about it being about kinship, solidarity, friendship, and supporting your own weird self. And that is true in the other storyline that we get here. We get a focus on Migleemo in this episode, who is always a fun character. Paul F. Tompkins, I adore. Paul F. Tompkins, I haven't spoken about this, but Paul F. Tompkins, I think, is one of the sweetest comedians I've ever listened to. And this is meant as an absolute compliment, is I often sometimes listen to some of his stand-up. I listen to stand-up to help me sleep, and his stand-up is just very comforting, funny, and hilarious, but very warm and welcoming, and he's such a perfect fit for Lower Decks. So I'm glad that he's been a guest star in several episodes and appeared around as Migleemo, and I'm glad he gets to take some center stage here in another storyline that is about finding your old weirdness and pursuing your own self, even within, the culture and philosophy that you grew up within, which, again, fits the ideas that are going on in the Klingon part of the episode as well. So just a really beautiful, very funny episode that just nails the Star Trek ethos that I love, and does so in a way that is a little bit different from the normal Lower Decks stories. So let's get into it in some specifics. And this is going to get into full spoilers, so jump off here. So we start off the episode following Ma'ak and Malor, and we get that Ma'ak is now working at his family vineyard doing blood wine and things like that. And I liked this not just because it shows Ma'ak is sort of out of the fleet and sort of feeling like he's doesn't really fit anywhere because he's no longer a captain, but isn't really seeking his captaincy. But I also like that he's working in a vineyard because it draws out again that parallel that we get that we've had for this character, which he is a parallel to Boimler. Going way back to Weege Dooge, the first episode that Ma'ak appeared in, it was very clear that Ma'ak was meant to be sort of a Klingon reflection of Boimler and Boimler's character arc of wanting to be a captain and sort of being seen as the weirdo who's hyper obsessed with like the ideals of Starfleet, but not necessarily knowing always how to express it. And so he was in miniature version of that. And so him having a vineyard parallels Boimler also having a vineyard, or a raisin farm, I guess is what he had. And so the parallels between those two characters are extended here. And I like that. I like that Ma'ak is sort of an interesting commentary on someone like Boimler and his relationship with Mariner, who Mariner is coming in here to try to get him to, get his captaincy back. And I love the edict of unreturned favors that she has. Like, we have to fight a bear is like a human ritual. I wish we actually did have that in a human society. It'd be very funny. And I love that she and Boimler practiced it. Like, she's like, oh yeah, the edict of unreturned favors, right? Boimler's like, oh yeah, the bear. I also love that Boimler's continue growing his peach fuzz. I love that as a recurrent gag. And I also love Boimler being so into Klingon minutia and just being so excited to do Klingon stuff. Like, the one point in the episode where he jumps on the targ and goes, "Yee!" At one point was, I just nearly died. Boimler is so freaking adorable at everything in this episode. Just wonderful. One joke I also have to mention here that I really, really did love was the experience bees joke. There's one point where we get a establishing shot of Kronos and two Klingon vehicles go by each other and almost hit each other, and they yell "Experience Beach" to each other, which I nearly died at because that is such a very specific Star Trek reference. For those of you who don't know, there was an old Star Trek The Next Generation board game. I played it. It's actually not a very good board game. However, it did come with one of those sort of like VHS tapes that you watch while you play the board game and sort of like interrupts your game at certain points and you have to react to it. It's the storyline is essentially a Klingon who is played by the same actor who plays Martok, but is not Martok, takes over the Enterprise D and is like trying to stop you, the players of the game, from capturing the Enterprise D back from him. And one of the things that he has you do is every time he comes on, he says "Experience Beige," which is like a weird thing that happens in the game that you have to deal with.
You, the one who is moving now, answer! Experience Beige.
So it's just this really funny thing because it'll keep coming on and going in this very Martokian voice going, "Experience Beige."
You, the crew member who is moving now. Experience Beige.
It's just so funny.
Experience Beige and learn the strength of a Klingon.
Just, it's hilarious, right? So I'm glad that they had a little oblong reference to it in this episode. But yeah, going further into the storyline here, I love all the nuances of Mock's arc because he is someone who kind of, to a degree, sees honor as like very individualistic. Like, he has to take everything on. It's a kind of about him and not really working in solidarity with other people, and kind of that Klingon-esque view of honor as like how strong you are and being an independent warrior. Whereas all of the trials that they go through, such as the pains trials where they go through the pain sticks, Boimler and Malor, his brother, in the Targ one, sort of showcase like, no, it's about solidarity and working together with an honorable crew. That matters, and that's what gets you through these things. Again, very Star Trekian style message about solidarity and working together and building each other up, rather than it always being this very individualistic take on something. So love that communal aspect to this, the jokes going on. Also love seeing our Klingon friend from way back in season 1, Mariner's best friend. I love Boimler being like, "Oh, I'm glad to just be remembered at all," when he gets his name wrong, which was adorable. And yeah, I mean, all of this was really great, leading to the ultimate twist where it's revealed that Mock doesn't want to be back in the fleet because he doesn't want to work for a guy like, I forget the jerk's name who runs the council, but that guy, because he is so, diminishing and looks down on people he sees as weaker. And I love Mariner pointing out his ideology of like, oh, well, he was beaten by a weak guy, your brother must have sucked. And just like his diminishment of Mock as a person, and not viewing solidarity and honor as something that is about like building up a crew, and Ma'ak just not wanting to join into that, but then them finding a bureaucratic way because Boimler's very bureaucratic minutia, being able to find a way out for them by conscripting this guy and having him be chosen to get killed in the final ritual, and then him trying to kill Ma'ak, but then Ma'ak murdering him in return because that's the honorable thing to do. So it still managed to be very Klingon-esque. So all of that was absolutely wonderful. I also should say, I didn't mention, the opening credits theme song was different. We get a very subdued Klingon-esque focused opening credit sequence. Really beautiful opening. I think, frankly, some of the best visuals that Lower Decks has done. Like, adored this. Like, shout out to all the artists on that one. That was really, really lovely. Lower Decks always looks great. I think the art is always fantastic in the show, but even that opening sequence in particular was really, really beautifully done. So really loved that. But this causes me to jump over to the second storyline of the episode, which is the Migleemo one. And this one I really, really love too for numerous different reasons. First off, I love that his whole culture, the Cloacans, I believe is his species name, they built a culture around food. Like they went out into space to find strange new meals, which again, very Starfleet, Star Trek ethos, but in a different way. And it kind of mirrors the Klingon sort of sense of honor, and like how Klingons have a very similar view of honor, like Starfleet does, but expressed their own specific, unique cultural way. And the same thing here is Migleemo sort of having wanting to explore strange new meals in his own way as a therapist. And we have these sort of elitist leaders of their society who are very elitist critics, putting down everything that he does, all the food that they make, the food that he makes together with the crew, with Tendi Rutherford and Captain Freeman. Again, is that this idea that they work together to build something and make something with each other that is really beautiful, but these people they look down on it because they're again very elitist. And I love that Migleemo figures out that they actually don't have any taste buds through his psychologist background. And it goes to this idea that feels very Deep Space Nine to me, and I'll explain why. He did not pursue what his culture told him to pursue, Migleemo, which is to be a food critic, but he still carries that ethos of his culture in his heart, with how he views being a psychologist. The way he talks about it is still in the language of a food critic, but just about being a psychologist. And it reminds me of that one episode of Deep Space Nine where we meet a Klingon lawyer, who the Klingon lawyer is, he views the law as a battlefield. And that's how he sort of squares being a lawyer instead of a physical warrior in Klingon culture.
It does have its flaws, however. It emphasizes procedure over substance, form over fact.
I'm sorry if you feel it puts you at a disadvantage.
On the contrary, I look forward to fighting on your terms.
This is not a fight. It's the search for the truth.
The truth must be won.
And I always loved that idea of different jobs within Star Trek being in different cultures, still having the ethos of those cultures, just expressed in a different way. I think we even got to see that recently in Star Trek Prodigy Season 2, where we met a Klingon scientist in one of those episodes, who also sort of sees himself as battling with science, which is, again, just a really cool idea. And so I like Migleemo kind of representing this recontextualizing of being a psychologist, which to me reads as very queer. I know people are oh, you're putting a queer metaphor. When I talk about putting a queer lens on this and why I love Lower Decks, I think Lower Decks is a very queer show through a queer lens, which is people who are kind of outside the norm of Starfleet, of their cultures, outside of what their culture tells them to be. And yet they still kind of uphold a lot of those ideals in a really beautiful way and sort of build their own cultural connections with each other and through each other. And that's a very queer idea that I think Deep Space Nine represented. I think Lower Decks represents really well. And I think Migleemo in Microcosm here is doing too. So loved all of that. Again, me overanalyzing the episode, but I really loved all of those elements that came to the fore here. Just trying to remember if there's any other jokes that I really loved. I mean, the amuse-bouche, the greeting amuse-bouche was really funny. I loved that. Brimbo was the name that Boimler had. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I think it was all really, really great. The only other thing that I want to mention is we came out at the end of the episode where we get the reference to the dimensional holes that have been popping up. Mariner was actually there to study some dimensional holes, which is going back to the overall sort of background storyline that's going on this season, which is dimensional holes are popping up everywhere. And now they know someone is making them, as we learned at the end of the episode. So curious to see where that storyline is ultimately going. I really have no guesses at this point. Usually I have some speculation, but I don't think we know enough context for what these holes are doing for me to really speculate really well. But I am just curious to see what they're going to do with it. Like I said, this is a really fun, great episode. Loved it a lot. And I hope to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. But beyond all of that, my friends, live long and prosper.